showing your love for God, your love for others, and even your love for yourself. I am Aaron McCoy. I am the main geek over all of this here, bringing you the word. I'm happy to be back here. I know it's been a little while, but I think I got a better system here in place to where we're going to be able to keep up with them better, get the videos and podcasts rolling good. One of the reasons it's taking me so long to get these done, this one's important. This is very, very important, and I honestly, I filmed this one like 7 times. I filmed it, and then like, oh wait, I forgot about this, and then deleted it, and oh, what about that? And honestly, I've just had to come to the point where I'm like, okay, this is going to be imperfect. This is going to be 101. There's going to be so many things I leave out of here. It's just not going to be everything, but I think that we will still find some good nuggets in here, some good ways to help us grow in our love for one another. Reflecting Christ. So, if you don't know what we're talking about, we're doing kind of a sub-series here as we're going through Galatians. We're looking at this passage here in Galatians 3:27, where it says, "For as many of you as were baptized into Christ have put on Christ. There is neither Jew nor Greek. There is neither slave nor free. There is no male and female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. And if you are Christ, then you are Abraham's offspring's heirs according to the promise." Now, so what we're looking at here is that within that, these are all the major political issues that we have going on today. So we've got classism. That's what we talked about on our last one, where it says that there is neither slave nor free. So that's one problem we have of income disparities. Then it says that there is neither Jew nor Greek. So this is racial differences and cultural clash. That's what we're going on today. And then next week it says there's neither male nor female, which that one will probably be the trickiest one for me to do here. Because honestly, I'm still learning a few things myself, but I'll give you the best that I have as far as what we can learn from scriptures. So as I said, look, I'm fallible. I'm learning. I would love to continue the conversation on this in any directions. Please enter in your comments. We can keep this conversation moving. I like. I've talked a lot about race with a lot of different people, a lot of different friends. They've helped open me up to things that I didn't quite understand before. I've researched a lot of these things, but it's really complicated. And I remember I was talking to one of my friends, and he's like, "Man, why do white people say that it's so it's hard to talk about race?" It's like, well, because it's complicated. It's very complicated, and if you don't realize that there's complications here, then you are not listening in any direction. If you think, oh, it's simple, then you are not listening to the problems people are having. Look, it's complicated because of history, it's complicated because of politics, it's complicated because of language, complicated because of class and power. We got fuzzy cultural definitions, complicated because of language, complicated because of identity. There's all these things that makes it very hard. And so I want to try to break apart some of these, see what we can learn, see if we can, as I said, better love one another. Because my goal is that I want to see everyone empowered. I want to see everyone empowered. I do want to see Black empowerment. I don't want anybody to think less about themselves because of the color of their skin, because of something that they have no control over. I don't want anybody to see themselves as anything less than the child of God. And that would include white folk too. Honestly, I don't want to put them down. I genuinely don't believe that we have to stomp on anybody to raise somebody else up. I genuinely believe that we can all grow, that we can all be empowered and all try to find some sort of unity. So you might be saying, oh, wait, so are you just some other white guy just out here claiming all lives matter? Well, look, as I said, complications of language. It depends what you mean by that. It depends what you mean by all lives matter, because in a lot of ways, I think everyone would agree, even a lot of the Black Lives Matter folks. Most of them would even agree, yes, of course, all lives matter. But what that cry of all of Black Lives Matters is, hey, we don't feel like we matter. We don't feel like the way that we're represented, and the way that you know, cultural responses, and all sorts of difficulties that are faced. It's like we don't feel like, you know, that we are being heard, that most of society doesn't even care. So you know, I understand, because whenever the first time I heard that term Black Lives Matter, like, I was taken aback. I'm like, what? I was like, of course, all, you know, of course you matter. Like, I almost felt, if it's kind of like if you've ever been in a relationship, you know, and you really thought that you were doing good, you really thought that your significant other felt loved, felt appreciated, and then they say something of like, do I even matter to you? You know, you take offense, because it's like, wait, what? Of course you matter to me. But if that person isn't feeling loved, well, look, we got to have some conversations. We got to see what's going on. We got to see what we can do to help that person feel loved and feel cared for. And that can be tricky. That can be very, very tricky. One thing is, I mean, you know, different people they receive love in different ways. And, you know, you hear different expectations from different people. It just, as I said, it gets complicated. Now, something I don't want to do as well, I hate the idea of white people speaking on the behalf of black people or any other minority. I really despise that. For one, is because, well, not everybody thinks the same. You know, you might talk about some generalities that tends to be popular within a culture, but I mean, there's so many variants. I mean, each person's an individual. Each person has their own perspective. I can't just say, oh, this is the black voice, or this is the white voice, or this is, because there's so many, so many perspectives. I remember whenever the first incident with Michael Brown happened, and all the pain and the hurt that happened with that. I remember watching four YouTube videos, 4 different black pastors, all with different perspectives, all with different views of how should we be handling this, what should we be doing. Yeah, so I don't want to come in here. I hate, you know, I don't want to be the whole white savior complex coming in. Here, let me show you how to do it, Sonny Jim. I don't want to be that, but what I do want to be is a mouthpiece for a dark-skinned Middle Easterner who is called the Prince of Peace. Okay, I want to try to take his words. I want to take what he has to say, and I want to try to amplify it. I want to declare it. And I believe of what I believe that Christ is calling us to. I'm not trying to come up with my own solutions, because quite frankly, I don't have all the solutions. But I'm going to do my best to try to proclaim what Jesus has to say, to help us just to hear each other. Because, man, I mean, I've grown a lot. I've grown a lot in my time, and I'll have some confession through here as well. Like, I grew up, I went through a mostly black high school, 75% black. I was a minority there. And you know what? It had some ways, some positives and negative effects on me, and some things that I had to learn and grow in. So I will be upfront about that as we continue on. So to try to bring some, as I said, I want to try to bring clarity to why it's hard. Why it's hard to talk about race. Why it is that there's so much division. So first, what I want to talk about are some of our cultural differences and cultural conflicts that we have. Because a lot of times when people say that we have racial problems and racial differences, really, I think what the heart is that we have cultural differences. That often clash, that have a hard time living simultaneously together. Now, it's not impossible, but it's challenging and very hard, which this is nothing new in America. I mean, the whole idea of the United States was that, we had these different colonies, these different areas, and they had very different ideas of how life should be. And the idea that, okay, well, we're going to unify behind some primary principles But then some of those ideas of what's the right way to do government, what's our values, what do we hold, to be most deep and true, very different beliefs, and many of those beliefs have still spurred out to today. So there were some colonies that were very anti-slavery. There were some places, parts of America that from the start was very pro individual or freedom and accepting people's individuality. Then other places, were pretty awful, to say it lightly. They saw humans as being different, and it was evil and it's terrible. And as I've said before, and this is something that hurts, the fact that people use the Bible to try to justify this. And I know I've said this before, is that whenever the Bible talks about slavery, it's talking about indentured servitude. It is not talking about what we think of as American, race-based lifelong slavery. There were very strict rules, how long it was not race-based. This was really, now it wasn't good whenever it talks about what was going on, but it was different. It wasn't quite what we think of whenever we think of slavery, in the American sense. And so it definitely hurts to think that people have used the Bible to try to justify something so evil and so terrible. But because of this, because of our differing ideas and different, beliefs, they splintered off into these different cultures. Now, if you think about, okay, well, what is a culture? What is culture? Well, if you look at it, the core root term in there is connected to the word cultivate, that you're developing something that is good. You're developing something. So you have wild, crazy wilderness, and then, I'm going to cultivate this and make a garden out of it. So we're going to take, human nature, red tooth and claw, and we're going to try to hone it into something that's more civilized and something that has some cohesion to it, so that humans can flourish and that humans can do better, that it's not just tearing and ripping apart each other. And each culture has things that are valuable to it. They do, and they have things that help, because if they didn't, then that culture would have died off. That culture wouldn't have survived. So if the culture is here, it's because there's something good. There's some kind of merit to it. But I also believe that every culture has flaws. Every culture has flaws. My culture has flaws to it. So one example I like to look at are the Aztecs. Now look, the Aztecs were amazing plumbers. They were amazing at their what they did with their water systems. They were light years ahead of the Europeans and what they've been able to do within their aqueducts and their sewage systems. And all these things were brilliant, were absolutely brilliant. They also like to lop heads off of people and use them as a soccer ball and sacrifice people to the sun gods. And that I will classify as a negative cultural value. Okay, so if you want plumbing done, go to the Aztecs. If you want sporting, don't go to the Aztecs, okay? Positives and negatives. And this is part of us being human. So part of the fall, what we know in Christianity is that every human is broken. Every human has their flaws to them. So I think that when talking about these things, we need to both learn to appreciate what some cultures bring to the table, but then we also need to be humbled by our own culture and to realize we have flaws, we have problems, and to try to take this of both appreciation, celebration, celebrating your own culture, celebrating what you bring to the table, but to also be honest to say, we could be wrong about this. It's possible that some of these things that we've been doing for centuries might not be as beneficial as what some other cultures might have. Celebrating differences. But so the problem though, this is hard. This is really hard, because whenever you have different values and different ways of doing things, or different things that are considered normal, I think that's another good way to think about cultures. It's like, what are the norms? What can I expect from you? I think about, whenever the first George Bush senior, he went to Iraq, or I think it was Iraq. It was somewhere in the Middle East. Well, he lifted his foot on his knee and had his foot exposed towards the people. Now, that is a highly, highly insulting gesture to them. It's like saying, you are under my foot. Now, to us, and for Americans, it's like, okay, whatever, you got your foot up. But no, different cultures take things differently. We have different expectations. We have different, what we perceive as an insult can be very, very different. So it's good to have norms. It's good to know what to expect. But as I said, whenever those norms are thrown off, we get conflict. So like think of some examples. So, in particular, looking at, which mostly I'm going to be talking about white and black, but I every culture has their own differences and unique aspects to it. But think about okay, going to the movie theater. What's expected within white culture versus what's expected within black culture? Within white culture, the idea is, okay, we are here to watch a movie. So we will be respectful of the movie. I'm going to sit here and I'm going to watch the movie. And I need to be respectful of those around me as we watch our film. Each person, it's a very individualistic experience. Each person there is there to watch the movie. Within a lot of the black culture, man, it's a communal experience, okay? Now, if you've ever been to like a horror movie at a black theater, it's amazing. It's great. I love it. People are screaming. People are yelling. People are, oh, did you see that? Did you? Very expressive, very back and forth going on. Now, both of those experiences have merit. Okay? Both of those have things that are good about it. There are sometimes I've been in a theater when I've needed to pay attention and we needed it to be silent and I need to see what's going on without any distractions. But then there's also something great about the community event of talking, of going back and forth. That's great too, but we can see that if you have one person who's expected to be, who wants to just silently watch a movie, and then you got a bunch of people talking, we can see how that would be annoying for the person there to watch the movie. And the reverse is true. So if you're going in expecting a communal experience and someone keeps on shh, trying to tell you to be quiet, well, I mean, that's insulting. That's something that's like, man, why? I'm here to have a good time. I'm here to have some fun, and you keep on shushing me? Like, we can see that it's neither one's right or wrong, but there's clash. There's cultural clash going on. And this is why things are complicated, because it's like, well, who gets their way? Well, who's the one who gets... And so this... This is one of the things that's difficult about democracy. Because the way that democracy works is that the majority wins. Now, if you've got the majority are culturally white, if you have a majority of people doing that, then they're the ones who get their way. And so this is why and we'll talk a bit more about this in a minute. This is why there are some people who will say that America at its foundation is racist. Now, there's a lot of different reasons. There's a lot of things that we could talk about, whether that's the history or all these different things. But if you think about it, by definition of a democracy, the majority gets their way. So, where does that leave the minority? It leads to, culturally, a lot of times not getting their way. And so we need to have, and so sometimes we might not even notice this or even talk about it or think about it. And thankfully, whenever we have these dialogues and we have conversation to try to understand each other and what each other's needs are, sometimes we can have laws that will work best for everybody. We can find ways, I would love it if theaters, maybe they did Thursday night, Thursday night community night, or Thursday night, talk as much as you want night, or where it's expected that, hey, if you come in at this time, we're going to be loud. I mean, I don't know, but the thing is that we have to talk through this. We have to be aware of it. In order to try to meet the needs of everybody, of as many people as possible. Now yeah, we'll get deeper into this as we go along. But as I said, we need to value and try to find the value of the differences, and try to be respectful of each other's differences. And also, I think there's a time of understanding the thing of feeling like you don't belong. Which, if you've ever traveled somewhere, if you've ever gone outside of the country, you know that feeling of just, man, I just don't belong here. This isn't my space. This isn't, this area wasn't made for me. It's like, it's like being left-handed. The world is made for right-handed people. Why? Because the majority people are right-handed. So we want to meet the needs of the majority first. We want to be most concentrated on the majority. But then it's like, well, what do we do with the minority? Do we just say, well, forget you, just live with it, just deal with it? Or do we try to make a society that works best for the most amount of people? And then where's that line? Where is the point to where the majority is being left out, or being I don't want to say inconvenienced, because that just sounds too dismissive, but where it's affecting them. So it's tricky. It's tricky. And as I said, I'm not here to say that I have all the answers. I don't have all the answers. I just want us to say that these conversations are reasonable. Like, we need to talk about it and try to think about how can we best do things in a way that meets most people's needs. Because I don't want people to feel left out. I don't want people to feel like they don't belong, and I don't want to make people feel like you have to change your culture in order to belong. Now, some of that might be internal. So an example, I know, whenever I was working last year, so I'm a teacher, and whenever I started up, the pandemic was just, still weren't sure what was going on. We just got back to the schools, and I teach at a behavioral school as well, so we always have a paraprofessional in there, someone to help and assist. So like if the students start fighting or different things, we can try to help maintain. And there was a guy there who is a black guy, and whenever I first met him, man, I had this feeling, I had this thought, this internalized feeling of, oh, this guy's not gonna like me. I mean, we're different cultures. I mean, this guy, he's this cool dude, really chill, really laid back, but cool. And I'm like, man, I am the geek with the Bible, all right? I pride myself on being a geek. That's my culture. And I'm just like, man, I don't know if we're going to get along. I don't know if we're going to, no, maybe not. And he's just kind of a quiet guy too, just kind of chill. And so that was my first instincts is, man, he's not going to like me. And so I was very apprehensive of even talking, because I just had this feeling of, he's not going to like me. But the more we talked, man, we start finding some movies that we both liked, start finding different, some things that didn't expect that he would like. I know he went to LA, I lived in LA before, and so we started finding stuff, and man, we became friends. We became, really enjoyed each other's company. Even to where, the point, I remember he said his girl was like, man, he said, man, your name comes up a lot at my house. And my girl said, oh, so what Mr. McCoy have to say today? Because I was always bringing up something. And so that was really cool. And so sometimes we get this feelings of, man, I don't fit here. I don't belong here because of my differences. But man, we do have a lot in common. We do have things that we can connect on. But it's hard, just that knee-jerk reaction that we have, that knee-jerk judgment. Man, it can really lead to us thinking, oh, this person doesn't like me. Oh, this person doesn't want anything to do with me. When a lot of times, that's not true. Yeah, a lot of times that's not true at all. Now, something I do want to address, and this is part of my confession. So this is sin, what I'm about to get into. Um, so I had, as I said, I grew up at I went to a black high school, and I start having feelings. There were certain things that I found within the culture that I didn't like. Um, and now I would say to myself, I would say, oh, it's not the individual people, because I still had black friends, had several black friends, good people, enjoyed their company. Actually, the very first person who talked to me, because I was homeschooled until high school, and so I had no idea what I was doing. The very first guy who talked to me, Jason Madlock, was a black guy, and he, still friends today. Um, but what I told myself, what I would say is, oh, no, it's not the skin color, it's not the people, but some of these cultural things. I called it the ghetto culture. I was like, oh, that drives me crazy. Oh, that drives me nuts. Oh, that's frustrating. Oh, it's, all these different things, negative things. And I thought, like, oh, well, that's fine, because I'm not hating an individual person. I'm not going out saying, oh, I don't like that guy because of this. I don't like that guy. No, I'm just kind of, in general, certain mindsets, certain ways of doing things. But then I realized, man, there's some of these people who meet that stereotype, like to the full, like 95% of the stereotype, it fits them. And I had to realize that, you know what? That is a person made in the image of God. Not a, oh, they got to be redeemed out of that. Oh, they've got to get, now maybe a handful, but no, certain things, certain just cultural differences. I'm not talking about any kind of sin issues or anything like that. Just differences that I had this real frustration with, this real, at times, anger towards. And as I said, not individual people, but the culture. But God had to cut into my heart and say, Aaron, you're fooling yourself. Because there are people who are a part of that culture, people made in the image of God who are a part of that culture. And what we learn in the book of Revelations is that our culture sticks with us into eternity. He says, I saw in heaven every tribe and tongue and people. That means that part of our culture sticks with us. This isn't something to just be redeemed out of, but it's a part of us. And that I needed to learn that God made them, and that even though, maybe I might do things a bit differently or have a different way of going about things, I cannot despise my brothers and sisters in Christ. I cannot look down on them. I cannot judge them. They're valuable. Jesus died for them. And thankfully, I really have learned. I mean, I tell you what, just celebrating the black culture a bit, so much good that we have in America came out of black culture, especially if you're into someone of the arts and entertainment. Man, music. Holy cow, if you like music, unless it's classical, every music came from the black culture. Right, everything you've got, because out of the spirituals came, blues, which became jazz, and became, they had like what they call the doo-wop songs, which became rock, which became country, which became pop. Pretty much every single bit of music besides classical, everything that we enjoy, all of that came out of the black culture. All of it. I mean, shoot, Beatles, they were playing songs when they first started off. They played music from different bands and stuff like that. I mean, a lot of it were from black artists. It's not a secret. It wasn't anything that they were trying to hide. But yeah, it all came from them. It all came from that culture. Yeah, there is a lot good there. And shoot, man, and then you got like the church. Man, the church. is divided this way as well, very similar to the movie theater experience. That now look, and I don't want to disparage sort of that concept of the high church, that okay, we will be here, we will be respectful, and we will be honoring of God. Now, I appreciate that. I have several friends who are those types of churches. Now, me, I go to more of a charismatic church. It's a lot more multicultural. But man, I love that. I love the high energy of a black church. I love the kind of the talk back, the feedback, all of that. I mean, I love it. I love it, but I understand that there's differences there. And we need to make sure that we are not looking down and despising people for their differences. I mean, even, we talk about the body of Christ. We've got the hand, the foot, the eye, the ear, the nose. All these things have a purpose, and this is all part of the body, and we should not despise one or the other. That they all have their purposes. They all have something to bring to the table. So we should not be dismissive. We should not look down on people for their cultural differences, because God made it. God made different cultures. So the next thing I want to get in is identity. So identity is a very tricky subject. It's something that's the heart of a lot of the cultural conversation these days, the political conversations, understanding your identity, connecting to your identity. And the thing to think about is that we have things that we enjoy, and then we have things that are part of who we are. So like for me, okay, look, I enjoy sports. I like it. It's fun. I go to a Cardinals game. I have fun. I come home, and that's it. I'll watch the World Series. I'll watch the playoffs a lot of times, and that's it. Now, most of the people in my family, this is who they are. Like, it's part of them. It's part of their core identity of who they are. They know the players. They know the stats. They know all of these things. And then and you'll see this. So like my brother-in-law, man, whenever the Cardinals are doing bad, man, he gets depressed. He gets down. Why? Well, because it's part of him. It's part of who he is. And if the Cardinals are doing good, well, hey, he gets happy. Now, for me, I have things that are part of who I am. So for me, films are a deep part of my identity. I love movies. Like I watch movies the way normal people watch sports. Like I know the directors, and I'm watching to see what the critics say and how much money a movie makes, and all these different things, and the awards and all these things. Like I get deep into film. I love film. It is a part of who I am. Which is fine. It's good. That's part of being an individual, is that you have all these different things that makes up who you are. But the thing that gets tricky with some of this is that to insult some of these things, whenever this becomes a core of who you are, to insult that thing is not just insulting the thing, but it's like criticizing a piece of your soul. It's like criticizing a part of who you are. So if somebody says something against the Cardinals, okay, fine. Yeah, you think they're too successful and too corporatized and they dominate too much. Okay, still my team. I don't care. But man, you got some people like shoot. You look at this in Europe with like soccer or football. They get violent. They have like gangs. They have hot soccer hooligans who will literally go out in the streets and say, "Let's go find somebody who supports the other team, and we're just gonna beat the living daylights out of them," because it's part of who they are. So what's tricky? So this is what's tricky, is that for a lot of people, particularly people of color, minorities, their race is a part of who they are. And this happened. We had a training the other day at my work. Doing like the racial sensitivity trainings and things like that. They talked about these different things. Like, okay, you've got your things that makes up who you are. Are you male or female? What color are you? What is your hometown? What's your religious beliefs? What's your all these different things that makes up who we are. And then they'd say, well, what's your top one? What do you most identify with? And there were several people who I know, and a friend of mine I saw, it's like at the top was he identified as black. Like that was a core part of who he is. Now, what's difficult is that at least for the past 30, 40 years, we were taught, white people in America were taught that that's wrong. Like, do not see. So white people were trained, don't see your race as a part of you. Like, we were trained, race shouldn't matter. Race isn't, it's just skin color. It's like the color of your house. It doesn't have any difference depending on what the house is, whatever, who cares? But for a lot of people, especially people who fall into minority categories, now there's a lot of baggage that might come with that. Like I remember the first time I realized it, I was, me and a friend of mine, we went, jumping off of this cliff. I was out deep Missouri. There's a spot where you could, they have like these waterfalls, you jump in the water. And actually the one spot we were at, I realized I wasn't actually supposed to be there, and we ended up getting a $400 ticket, but that's another point. That's something entirely different. But, me and my buddy, we went to this little country town to get dinner. And I remember having the thought, man, I wonder if they would treat us the same if we were a different color. So some people, they do have a different experience because of some type of physical attribute. And so that does become kind of part of who you are. If you have to think about and worry about how am I going to be treated at this spot. And I remember the first time it really hit me, actually, I was talking with a friend of mine, black girl, Rika, one of my best friends, it was his wife. And I was talking with her, and just stupidly, I'm like, oh yeah, I don't think racism's that big of a deal today. And she looked at me and she said, have you ever been denied service at a Wendy's? Like, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that something like that was still going on today. Well, why? Well, because I'm not there to experience it. Just like because I walk into the country, pancake jamboree store, and everyone's treating me just fine. But no, I don't know. I mean, maybe they would have treated somebody with a different skin color differently. I don't know. And that's the thing, is that I don't know. I don't experience it. I don't feel it. And there's sometimes things even, you just get the feeling. So like I remember me and my dad, we were traveling to California, and we stopped off for gas in Texas. And I remember just getting some looks, because I had long hair. I just had some kind of looks of like, what the heck is this guy doing here? I know another time I graduated, all right? I got my English teaching degree. I was the first person within my immediate family to graduate college. Man, I was feeling so good. My dad sent me a text saying that he was proud of me. I'm like, yes, that feels good. Then lights come on, and then got pulled over for looking at my phone while driving. And the police officer was a woman. And I just kind of got the sense, I had this feeling of, oh, she doesn't like me because I'm a man. That was just kind of the feel. Now, there was nothing to prove it, but that was the feeling I got. And oftentimes things like with identity. So we think about identity. It's connected to the word individual identity, like an integer, individual person. So a lot of times what makes our identity are the ways that we feel unique, the ways that we feel separate, the ways that we feel like we're not part of the major group. So for a lot of minorities, there is this thing of, I identify with my race. This is part of who I am, and especially part of my culture, part of what my culture is. So, if you make a criticism of black culture, you're not just saying, hey, this is an individual characteristic that might improve your life. No, it is poking at like an open wound, like a core of who they are. It's criticizing people at their core. Now, as I said, so white people, we didn't grow up with this. We grew up saying this is wrong. Just kind of look at yourself. We're just kind of clear. Don't look at that as being a factor. But yet we still want to feel unity. We want to feel part of something. And so we don't really talk about white culture, but what we do get to talk about is American culture. So I get to say I'm an American. This is part of who I am. This is part of me, a part of my identity, part of my core is that I am an American. And it's like, oh, and the great thing about Americans, it's inclusive. Anybody of any color can be American and can identify with that. So we don't feel that it's racist, and we don't feel that there's anything wrong with that. And you know what? And I don't feel like it's not wrong to feel good identity about your country. There's nothing wrong with feeling patriotic, just as the same way there's nothing wrong with identifying as black and to feel a kinship with your black community. There's nothing wrong with that. But there's a problem. There is a problem when we take one of these different identities of ours and we take that and we put that as the ultimate identity, as this is the deepest core of who I am. Like this is the absolute pinnacle of who I am. You take a good thing because your culture is a good thing. Your identity is a good thing. But if you take any part of you and you say, no, this is the core of who I am, you cannot touch this, then you've got an idol. If you have something that you say, God, you cannot address this part of me, you have an idol. You have your new God of what defines you. We see the story of the Tower of Babel. These people, they wanted to do this achievement, create this building, which is good. I mean, God, I'm sure is pro architecture, but they said, no, this isn't just going to be a building, man. This is going to make us equal to God. This is going to be our core. And they had this unity and had all this stuff, and they made it this ultimate thing. They took this good thing and they made it an ultimate thing. And once they had that, their languages separated. They had divisions that happened within their own group. They took something else and said, this is what's most important. And so then they all start breaking down, breaking apart, not understanding each other, not knowing how to communicate. And man, you see this. Man, you see this. Shoot, right now I see this more on... Now, I don't like getting into politics too much, because I do believe that you can be a Christian and vote many different ways. Now, I think there's certain... there are certain characteristics I think that every Christian should support. There are certain policies I think everyone should be working towards. But I think that you can vote... in pretty much any direction, and still be a fellow brother and sister in Christ. So hey, there's one right there. So if you just right now said, no, you can't, you cannot vote against my party and still be a Christian, well that's you've found your idol. That your identity, your group identity of no, I am a Republican, I am a liberal, I am a libertarian, I am green, whatever it is. If you say, no, if you vote something else, then you're not a Christian anymore. Then that is placing your group identity above your identity in Christ. Because, I mean, look, there's a lot of things that we can vote on. There's a lot of different issues going on. And I think there are some issues that I think conservatives do a better job with. And then there's some issues I think Democrats do a better job with. And there can be some wiggle room in there. And so, we might say, well, what's most important? Well, I mean, that's why we have debating. That's why we have discussions. But something I do see, what I think is going on a lot right now within the Democratic side, I feel like they're starting to turn on themselves. So I saw something today saying for Tom Hanks, they said he's not, he is a non-racist, but he needs to up it to be an anti-racist. So they're saying, look, it's not enough. So they're kind of making these things, saying, okay, this is what is the number one issue. This is the number one thing that we've got to do. And they're criticizing. I mean, Tom Hanks, everybody loves Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks is great. But they're criticizing him, saying, no, he needs to be doing more. He needs to be joining this. And so now people are starting to kind of tear each other apart and starting to divide on each other. I know a lot of Democrats that say they feel very left out by what their current, what they're looking like at the moment. I had some times with this because I'm kind of more conservative libertarian as my personal feelings, but as I said, I'm up for different beliefs. There were some times, like, look, there were things I liked about Trump and things that were terrible about him. And there were very many times where I'm like, this isn't representing the conservative party. This isn't representing any sort of morality. Now, as I said, some things I did and some things I didn't like about him. But anyways, just looking at people's individuality complexities. I'm sorry, I'm starting to ramble a little bit. But we see here, so whenever we put our identity in something other than Christ, whenever we don't make him our ultimate, whenever we don't make him the number one, and people start picking at these things, that this is the core of who I am, and we get defensive. And so this is why, as I said, the whole thing of white people tend to connect to America more as their primary identity. And so then you'll see something like the whole controversy of taking a kneel. So you had one group that's like, you, by insulting the flag, you're not just making a political statement. You are poking at the core of my being. But then to have somebody say, well, wait a minute, can't you just recognize that there's problems going on? Can't you recognize that there's issues with police brutality and harassment? Can't you recognize that there's issues that black people go through that white people don't tend to have issues with? For them, then it's like, wait, now you're poking at my individuality. And so you have these people who their ears, they just can't listen to one another because it's like our identities are fragile. We have very, very fragile identities right now because we're getting away from Christ as our core, as our number one, as our firm foundation that the winds and the storms cannot blow over. I can talk about almost anything that I love. Anything we can talk about the good and the bad of it. And I'm okay. I am okay. Look, I have 2 Star Wars tattoos on me, and you could tell me to my face that Empire Strikes Back sucks, and I'm okay. We can talk about it. I can understand certain things. I can say, oh, okay, well, I see why that doesn't fit you. I can see why you don't like this and that. And my identity is solid. And same thing with America. You can tell me your criticisms of America. And I'm like, okay, there are some problems that we still have. There are things that we need to grow in. You can even criticize white people or white culture. And I can say, okay, well, look, here's some things. Yeah, maybe a couple of these things we should improve on. Maybe there's a few things here that we can get better at. because my identity is not tied in those things. My identity is in the gospel, the fact that God loves me, not because of my achievements, but because of who he is, because of his death on the cross. He has purchased me. He has adopted me into his own. So I have a deep security in that. So you can insult things of me. You can insult, things within my identity and group's identities, and I'm okay, and I can listen to it and try to grow because I have a firm foundation in Christ. So, what do we do? How can we try to mend some of the problems that we have, because it is tricky. Okay, because we don't want to, so first off, I want to say something that I think almost everyone can agree with, is that racism is wrong. I think everybody would agree with that someone shouldn't have to suffer or have less because of where they were born or something that's beyond their control. People should be treated with dignity and respect. I think we can agree with that, especially Christians should really agree with this, that people should not be judged by their skin color. But then there's the question of, well, what do we do to solve it? And that's where the issue is. So some people would say, shoot, there's a really famous video with Morgan Freeman where he says, what we should do is nothing. Just stop talking about it. That it should become something like, eye color. No one's like, oh, I don't serve them brown eyes. Don't get any brown eyes in here. No, they're shifty. It's like, okay, well, maybe race should just be treated like that. Just don't talk about it, and then it will be ignored. But then there's this fear of assimilation, of everybody just being mixed and put into one group, and this expectation of that everybody should act the same. When, and I can see that there. I can see that worry there of losing your culture, losing, things that you hold very valuable. I can see that fear there. And I think that's we should have respect for that. So really, a few things that I would say. One, culturally, I think we need to try to get the camels out of our own eye first. First individually, then collectively. So I think for the most part, if you're white, you should be saying, okay, what are things that we can do better? What are some things that what are ways that we benefit that should be a benefit for everybody? What can we do to make sure that everybody has those same, something I've heard, they've done tests and they've done studies that shown that if you have a stereotypical black name on a job application, they're less likely to get it than if you have a stereotypically white name. That's something that I don't even think about. Whenever I put down that my name is Aaron on an application, I don't even think that that's going to be some kind of problem for me. So we need to have these conversations. We need to try to get over some of our prejudgments and try and questions of, okay, what are things that are just cultural differences and that it's not necessarily good or bad, but just different. I think we need to try to look at our own culture more than we go trying to change another culture. And you know what? Shoot, so as I said, I teach at a behavioral school, and we would do these things called Circle. That was, it's kind of like a therapy type session. And this guy, amazing guy, really, I learned a lot from him. Man, there were some times when he was talking with these students, and he was flat out. He's like, hey, man, look, the way that the white people do this thing here, man, we got to start doing that more. We got to start following the way that they do this thing here. because he was a black guy, so he can say that. Now, I'm not going to go do that. I'm not going to go in and say, hey, you got to do it this way, or at least, especially not calling it out racially like that, because people get defensive, because people get, as I said, you get that poke, you get that feeling of that poke of being told what to do. It doesn't feel good. So, but what can we do? Well, what does the Bible say? What's something that we can say? Because I know there's a lot of worries out there. So there's worries about the extremes. There's worries about white supremacists. There's worries about these cultural Marxists that are trying to, kind of bring race. It's tricky. It's a really tricky problem because, so this would be the opposite of Morgan Freeman. Of say, well, let's look at the cultural differences. Let's talk about it, and let's criticize it, and let's maybe have governments that will provide some special treatments to people who fall within a certain category, which I can understand some of the some good that could come out of that. I do think that there's more problems. It creates more problems than it solves. But okay, let's see something that the Bible says. Okay, because we worry about these. We worry about these extremists. We worry about these destructive people with destructive ideas. So here in Jeremiah 23, so it's talking about false prophets going around telling dreams that are essentially lies. And this is what God says, Jeremiah 23:23. Am I God at hand, declares the Lord, and not a God far away? Can a man hide himself in secret places so that I cannot see him, declares the Lord? Do I not fill heaven and earth, declares the Lord? I have heard what the prophets have said, who prophesy lies in my name, saying, I've dreamed a dream, I have dreamed. How long shall there be lies in the hearts of the prophets who prophesy lies and who prophesy the deceit of their own hearts, who think to make my people forget my name by their dreams that they tell one another, even as the fathers forgot my name for Baal? So he's saying all these things about these prophets, all these evil things. They're turning people away. They're being destructive. And it says, what should we do then? What should we do? Well, he says, let the prophet who has a dream tell the dream. What? Let me read that again. He says, let the prophet who has a dream tell the dream. But let him who has my word speak my word faithfully. What has straw in common with wheat, declares the Lord? Is not my word like fire, declares the Lord, and like a hammer that breaks the rock in pieces? He says, don't try to stop it. Don't try to control it. Don't try to silence people. But let my word pour forth. Let it be known. And he says, doesn't it burn like fire? He says, if this is true, if this is real, this is going to have an impact. Now, politically, it's tricky. Because our question is about how do we solve the problem, not do we have a problem or what's the best way forward. But that is the question, is what's the best way forward? How should we go? But he says, declare my word. And so what, just say again, is that if you put any of your identity, your core, key, most essential identity, if you put it in anything other than Christ, you're going to be broken. It's a loose foundation. You're building your house on the sand and it will crumble. So here's the truth, is that before you are any of your other individual identities, you are a child of God. First, beyond anything. This is before you're an American. you are a Christian. You are a child of God. Before you are whatever race it is that you are a child of God. Before you are a male or a female, you are of God. This is who you are. And so one of the things that happens here is that I begin to see the humanity in those who are not like me. And it helps me to open up and to listen to the problems and struggles that they have. And so that we can talk. One of my favorite quotes as far as dealing with racism comes from Malcolm X, surprisingly enough. I don't necessarily appreciate how he uses the term white devils, but besides that, there's actually, and he's Islamic, which I am not. I'm very much a Christian. But what he said really, he said that the only way that we can progress, that we can solve this thing, he says, is that the white man and the black man have to sit together at the same table as equals. And each person needs to be free to speak their mind. So the white man needs to be able to speak his mind, and then the black man needs to be able to speak his mind without worrying about hurting the other person's feelings. Then we can deal with it. Then we can talk about it. Then we can find a solution, something that can work for each other. And that's actually, I think, is a huge problem right now, is the fact that we can't have real open conversations. Everything has gone underground. And then there's all this, well, what did you mean by that? What did you mean by this? I think that if culturally, if we could just say what we mean, I think that we'd be able to say, oh, those are the racists. Yeah, but right now it's at the place where our language is so confused that we don't even know what someone actually means and what they're trying to say. We're looking at ulterior motives, and we've got to stop. I think we need to be able to have real conversations, really talk to each other, and to try to see and ask ourselves, what can I do to help? How can we try to address whatever issues are going on? And really listen. And as I said, this goes both ways. I think that, there are some concerns that white folk have that can be legitimate. And then there's some concerns, many of the concerns that the black community has that are legitimate, and whatever other group has. But we need to talk. We need to really talk. Because, as I said, if you have your identity in Jesus, well, then I can look at my problems. I can look at my issues, and I can say, okay, what can be improved? As to where, in other ways, we just having fighting and brewing, and they have this anger growing, and this like I said with my one friend, who I just had this feeling of, oh, I don't think he likes me, or I don't think he will like me. But man, if we get to talk and we get to having conversation, and be vulnerable with each other, really be open. As I said, I mean, there were times I got picked on for discriminated against for being white at my school. There were times. I mean, I didn't feel it was like the most earth-shattering thing for me, just my experience, but it definitely made you feel that you weren't welcome. Definitely made you feel like an outsider. I can't say it's all the exact same, but we need to have open and honest conversations. And maybe sometime we could see that. Maybe I could have somebody on here. We can have a conversation, or maybe just in the comments. We can talk and try to see, okay, what are our problems? What can we do? What can we do to create greater unity while still having concerns about some of the critical theory issues, so that we don't revert into white racism. What can we do to help each other? Because you're loved. We need to see our individuals as loved as well. So that does it for me. This is Aaron McCoy signing off. Remember, this is Geeky with the Bible. It's a place where we help you grow in your love for God, for your neighbor, and for yourself. We'll see you next time.